except in your imagination, perhaps. I think it goes a step further in a way than you're suggesting, in that the purposes of writing have changed, or the uses for which we put writing have changed. I think that's something to be kind of bothered about. I think what is the difference, and I agree with you about the model. That kind of syntactic model is, in a sense, the conceptual model of what this is like. I said yesterday something about the partiality of writing, because if we regard this page here as being the text which is to be understood, this whole page as a single text, an integration of image and writing, then image does something, writing does something else, but not quite clear about how to be specific and precise about what each does. But together they do something which makes the whole into one coherent thing that is to be engaged with. But if that's the case, then writing does only a part of what is on the page. Yeah? It's only a part of what is to be engaged with. In this case, it's not the major part, because if the page is about circuits, then writing doesn't do that. But of course, also, image is also partial. And from that, we can kind of begin to move away from an understanding of writing, or maybe writing with a term standing behind it, of language being a full means of representation. Yeah? That anything that we think and want to express can be expressed in language. Anything that can be thought, anything we regard as rational kind of thinking can be expressed in writing. We now have to kind of move away from that and say, no, actually it's not like that. Writing is partial. In a place like this, the center of literacy, where writing is obviously the very, very core, one then has to ask the question, if writing is partial, in what ways is writing partial in contemporary forms of representation? Yeah? But it's your question, it's your comment, really. I mean, what precisely is it that it now does when it appears in these multimodal ensembles, in these multimodal texts? And the two terms which I used yesterday were the terms functional specialization. Image seems to be specialized to be representing those things which have two- or three-dimensional presence in the world, for which it might seem better than writing. And writing might be specialized to representing event-like things, actional-like things, for which it, being kind of temporally organized, might seem better. And the second term I introduced was functional loading, where you can ask which of these two modes, image or writing, carries most load informationally, and which is sort of, as it were, secondary. I've taken the term functional load from the work of a phonologist, Trubetskoy, who wrote in the 1930s, Russian working in Prague, where he talked about how in a phonological system, some vowels and some consonants do more work than others. So, just something briefly then about modes, logics, and affordances. Instead, therefore, of going the route of using language as a metaphor for every representational form, like visual language or visual literacy, or gesture language, or gestural literacy, saying, let's have a new term, mode, which names the resources which culture has made for representing, and then ask a question about what logic underlies these modes. So speech happens in time. One sound sort of follows another, although the notion of sound as a discrete thing is a problematic one, but things follow each other. Words follow each other, syntactic units follow each other. So it's temporally organized, and that becomes an important thing to bear in mind when we think about how is meaning made in speech and in writing, which is in that sense leaning on speech. So the logics of modes, image, the mode of image is governed by the logic of space. So you have a framed space, and in the framed space, You represent the entities which are significant in a particular relation to each other, and that relation expresses the meaning that you want to express about. So affordance is added to logic. Logic is about a profound sort of fundamental ordering, which we can't get away from because of the very physicality, the nature of the stuff in time or in space. But affordance also because materially they are different. So speech rests on sound. The relations of air, the kind of changes in pressure in the air, which kind of affects our ear. And so what can you do with sound? You can, sound is in time, so you can kind of use temporality as a means of organizing things, but you can also organize the other things which pertain to sound, namely more energy, less energy, as louder or softer, pauses, or pitch variation or whatever. And these are affordances. You can use pitch variation in different ways to make meaning. So languages like English have intonation, which they use in speech to mark units of information. Information units are basically using the facility of information. But in languages such as, say, some West African languages or Chinese, pitch is used for lexical things. So, the famous examples of, in Cantonese you have 7 tones, in Mandarin I think you have 5 tones, and the tone itself makes a difference lexically. A little bit like, it's a little bit like in English. I mean, English has tone to some extent because when you say yes, but if you say yes, yeah, these are different. Yeah, the tone changes and the word actually changes. It's not the same word because yeah isn't yeah. There are different lexical items. We don't treat them like that because we take writing as the basis for making our decisions, but actually these are different words. So English uses tone a little bit, but there are languages where tone is a very different function. In English it's used largely for, I suppose, grammatical syntactic things like forming statements and forming questions, those kinds of things. So mode, to get away from this too ready use of the notion of literacy and extending it metaphorically into anything that names a skill of some kind, or language similarly, for anything that has representational properties. The language of flowers, the language of dress, or something like that. But trying to be a little bit more careful about naming of the terms we use. Now, something about the development of alphabetic writing is important, I think, always to keep in mind. Alphabetic writing develops out of an attempt to record speech in some way. Initially, not so much to record speech, but to record practices or actions or decisions, but eventually to record speech in some way. So, the hieroglyphic writing system, a picture system of writing, becomes abstracted and becomes developed into representing speech. So writing at that point is the servant of speech. Speech is primary, and you abstract the characters or the pictures of the hieroglyphic system. For instance, the letter alpha is the abstracted picture of an ox's head with the horns on. Yeah? That's the aleph, the alpha. So that's the development of the writing system. But in that, what happens is that writing starts as being the servant of speech, whereas latterly, let's say,